Given this background, let's take a look at what we do know and don't know about this problem, starting with the basic question of its scope or frequency. Unfortunately, on this very basic issue, we do not know as much as we would like to know. We were very pleased when the GAO agreed to study the problem at the request of Representative Miller, but were dismayed when they were no more successful than others in coming up with good estimates of the number of youth in private residential placements. One of the lead investigators, Kay Brown, reported that an unknown number of youth are placed in facilities by parents or others. Part of the problem is that many of these programs are in states that don't require them to be licensed or to provide information to the state. And in some instances where information is provided, there is no independent check on its accuracy. Estimates of the number of youth placed in private residential programs by their families start at about 10,000 per year and go up as high as 100,000 per year. Above and beyond those who are placed with private family resources, we know from the GAO study released in 2008 that just 4 years earlier, in 2004, there were over 200,000 youngsters placed in residential care by states, using at least some federal funding. Nor do we know as much as we should about who the young people are who enter these programs and what the nature of their needs are. There's an assumption that youth who enter these programs have serious special needs, but this assumption has been called into question over and over again. There has been considerable documentation of youth without serious problems, being placed in programs because anxious parents, trying to do what they think is best, were persuaded by program staff that the best thing that they could do for their child was to make a placement. This is not to say that programs don't serve youngsters with severe challenges. It is, however, to say that in the absence of any good data on the issue, we have to assume that there also is a high percentage of youth without such serious problems. Nor do we know much about the outcome of these programs, short-term or long-term. There has been virtually no independent research conducted about this. We know, and the survivors who are with us today are examples of that many youngsters, while scarred by the abuses of the program, have proven to be resilient and are leading meaningful and productive lives. Tremendous credit to them. We also know, however, of many youth who have left programs only to get immediately involved in substance abuse, who remain estranged from their families, or who have been unable to deal with the pain and have taken their own lives. For example, in testimony given at the April 2008 hearing of the House Education and Labor Committee, John Martin Crawford, a survivor of one of the programs, indicated that of 25 youth in his graduating class and the one prior, maybe 4 remained sober. The question obviously isn't whether we need to know more. Surely we do. The question, however, is whether we know enough already to determine that there's a serious problem requiring action. So let's take a look at what we do know, beginning with the number of programs and then proceeding from the referral, admission, and marketing stage to the transportation process to the actions within the programs themselves. We know that beginning in the 1990s, there quietly grew a network of hundreds of for-profit residential programs located around the country, but primarily located in states that had no licensing requirements, or very loose requirements. Utah, which had very lax requirements until a few years ago, has more programs than any single state. And Montana, which even now only requires that programs be registered, but not licensed or monitored, is another mecca for such programs. For example, the 2005 Program Directory of the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs, NATSA, listed 35 programs in Utah, the most in the nation, and 11 in Montana. A study done by the state of Montana in 2003 estimated that from 90% to 95% of the youth served in programs in Montana came from other states. As Representative Miller has pointed out, we know that there is a loose patchwork of state laws that govern these programs. We know also that programs often move from state to state, especially when problems occur in the original state, sometimes picking up and moving overnight. From a marketing perspective, we know that these programs advertise widely on the internet, appealing to anxious middle and upper class parents who either have the money available to spend on a placement or have the collateral to allow them to borrow the necessary money. We know from the reports of parents that when they inquire about a program, they typically get a rapid response, and the representative from the referral agency or actual program tends to heighten the seriousness of the problem, encouraging parents to make a placement before it is too late and the child ends up in jail or dead on the streets. We know that this process typically bypasses local mental health professionals, and the dictum referred to earlier from the National Alliance for the Mental Illness that has widespread agreement in the field that residential treatment should only be used if local resources have proven inadequate. We know that it is not just difficult, but virtually impossible for parents to tell a good program from a program that is abusive and is misrepresenting what they can offer. We are delighted in this regard that the Federal Trade Commission has issued a set of questions for parents to ask before making a decision about a program, building on work done by our ASTART group, and that's included in your packet. We know from research done by the GAO and reports from parents that referral agents often have conflicts of interest if they don't disclose, such as being connected to particular treatment programs, and that they are very adept at giving parents the answers they think parents want, and assuring parents that the program that they are recommending is perfectly suited for their child. We know that parents often interpret the fact that a program is a member of a particular trade organization as being a sign that it is of high quality, even when the organization does no program monitoring or accrediting. We know that parents often don't even think about issues related to licensing. Christine Gomez, a mother who placed her son in a program and later regretted it, told us that it never even entered my mind about whether it was regulated. She goes on to say that as she has worked with other parents, she has heard the same story over and over. Parents liquidated their assets and sold their homes to get hope for these children, and then their children were mistreated. None of the parents wanted their kids to be abused. We know that there has been a growth in educational consultants, a group that serves to help teenagers make appropriate selection of college and get accepted into the college of their choice, but also to help parents select and make a placement for a child with special needs. We know that there are educational consultants with great integrity and competence. We also know of those who have very little in the way of qualifications and are quick to make referrals to residential programs. One psychologist reported to me that she had been working with a teenager for quite a time and heard from the family that he met with an educational consultant, and within 20 minutes of meeting the educational consultant, the consultant recommended residential placement without doing any check with the psychologist. We know that referral agents often connect parents with private escort services to transport their child to the program. The escorts, usually two very large adults, show up after the child has gone to sleep. After the parents have signed the necessary paperwork, giving the escorts permission to transport their teenager, the escorts typically wake the youth up in the middle of the night with a straightforward message like this: "Your parents have decided to send you to a program in Utah for help. We are here to take you there. You have two choices. You can go peacefully or not." We know that at the startled youth protest, he or she is typically physically subdued and transported with handcuffs and shackles if needed. One 20-year-old who had been transported in this way when he was 17 reported, "I did not know where I was going when two strangers came into my room at 3 in the morning, handcuffed me, and dragged me down the stairs into a car." Can you even imagine what this must like? We've heard from program survivors that they have recurring nightmares years after that keep them from sleeping after experiences like this. And things do not get any better after the youth arrives at the program. We know that it is standard practice to deny youth contact with their parents for weeks, if not months, and that when contact is allowed, it is closely monitored by program staff to ensure that the young person does not complain. We know that parents are told, and this is, I think, one of the more insidious parts of these programs, as part of a tough love approach, parents are told that the child is a liar and a manipulator, and that program criticisms by them are merely attempts to get out of the program and should be ignored. We know that youth are not only cut off from contact with their families, but from the rest of the world as well. They have no access to a telephone, for example, to report abusive behavior.